In November of 2022, Men I Trust tweeted requesting someone make them a piece of hardware for their live sets. I responded, not really thinking much would come out of it, and woke up the next morning to a DM from them. After discussing with them what they wanted, I immediately ordered the parts and started figuring out how to make the hardware. So, what exactly did they want me to make? I'll start by explaining their problem. So, musical instruments, particularly keyboards, use a communication method called MIDI. MIDI is used to send information from a source to a destination, and that information can be anything from a note being pressed down, changing the delay in like an echo module, or changing the sound that's being generated on a different instrument. All of this information is sent over one wire and can either be daisy-chained across modules, or it can be split. This means that each module receives every piece of information that the modules upstream produce. When I started making the hardware, Men I Trust was using a DX7 keyboard along with mini foot pedals connected to it via MIDI. They were able to make a whole bunch of presets for each song and then switch them on the fly using a command generated from the DX7 keyboard. However, one foot pedal behaved strangely when receiving all of the MIDI data that the DX7 was putting out. In order to fix this, they only wanted specific MIDI commands to pass through to this specific foot pedal. In other words, they wanted me to design a filter that only allowed MIDI program changes through and then scrapped everything else. Fairly simple. As soon as all the parts came in, I got to work. I knew the enclosure would need three main parts, an input port, an output port, and a power plug. Using a 3-axis mill, I drilled all the necessary holes for the mounting ports and then mounted them up. After that, I opened up MS Paint and drew an absolutely sick label for the enclosure. I printed the label, stuck it to the box, and then I began assembling the electronics. The first thing that I did was use a piece of strip board and cut it down to size so that way it would fit into the enclosure. I sanded down the edges to make sure that there would be no contact to the outer shell of the enclosure so that way no shorts would occur. After that, I began soldering. The main parts that I used were an Arduino Mini and an opto-isolator. The opto-isolator ensures that the two devices are electrically isolated, which means that there's no impact to the audio made by each device. The Arduino Mini was the perfect size to fit into the enclosure, in addition to having the necessary I/O to make the filter possible. It was a bit tricky to get everything to fit into the enclosure, but in the end, it didn't prove to be extremely difficult. After everything was assembled, I went to make sure that everything powered on properly. I fried the circuit. Turns out the plug that I used wasn't really compatible with the circuit that I made. It was AC instead of DC, so it just blew up everything. I didn't have any spare Arduino Minis, so I had to order more and then wait to reassemble the entire circuit. I made sure not to use the same plug that I used last time. After another round of ordering parts, waiting, and assembling, it was finished. Next came programming. The code's fairly simple. It reads in all the data coming into the device using the serial read function, checks to see if the command's correct, and then outputs it if it's a program change command. You can see that I'm getting a whole bunch of signals like note on, note off. I'm getting program changes, control changes, more control changes, things of that nature. So I'm getting a whole bunch of data. So now if I do a quick switch, plugging in the MIDI filter. So now no note values pass through, but program changes pass through. Well, after that, I sent the circuit off to Men I Trust using their setup.
So this is my setup using the DX7 and my pedal board with Strymon pedals. The MIDI filter is hooked here. My synth goes to the filter and the filter then goes to the pedals. If you see, if I change programs, they all follow up on my pedal board and they switch patches, which is what I wanted. The problem was that without the filter, some notes like this one, the nope note, would trigger some unwanted MIDI CC effects on the pedals, like some distortion effects in the timeline pedal. Now it doesn't do anything. It works. And I can change my presets. Okay, so now I hooked the DX7 directly to the Strymon timeline pedal. So program changes still would work, but the annoying distortion effect. You can see the preset lighting in yellow. This triggers a distortion effect. When I have the filter on, this doesn't happen. It only does program changes like it should do. The filter came in with a nice sticker, but I removed it to keep the brushed steel aluminum look to match my pedal knobs. So thank you so much again for the nice filter. It'll be on my pedal board rig for the coming months and perhaps years if I decide to continue with the DX7 for that long. Many modern synthesizers have the option to just send program change through MIDI and ignore all notes on off. But this is an older synth that doesn't have the option, and the Strymon pedals don't come with an option to only receive program changes. So thank you again.
Thanks for watching. It was really nice being able to work with Men I Trust. While I have you here, check out that video up there. It's about how my friend wrote a book and he's making an audiobook. Or check out our channel down here. We do a whole bunch of different types of videos, so feel free to tune in. Thanks.